lot of companies, we want to have revenue that's SaaS or is recurrable revenue, but people usually when they're buying a computer or a big tow truck, they're not thinking I'm going to be paying recurring revenue on it. Do you feel like people will be able to attach some sort of software solution to trucks being tracked, and they'll actually be paying for that service on later on?
That's where they won't want to go.
Okay, yes. And then other question was
so just
yeah.
finish up on that. So there's, I think, no doubt that there will be a movement, in some cases gradual, in other cases faster, where you're not selling or buying an asset. You're paying for the use of that asset in some shape or form, because now you can track it, you can monitor it, you can adjust the usage and so on. And of all kinds of assets.
You said a really good statement earlier that people are going to buy outcomes, not.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. The robotics company that I'm in, they rent out their robot. It's much easier for a hotel to measure the value of a rental, right? Because they can see, provides service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, compare the cost of that versus buying something.
Okay.
That's, rental's just better.
So the upfront costs of building those assets can be on the company.
Either company, you have to have a business model that can accommodate that, but yeah.
And then the other question was, as a VC, what are some companies that you passed on that you wish you didn't pass on? So you're, there's some term for it, but what are some companies you're like, oh shit?
The anti-portfolio.
Yeah, the anti-portfolio.
Look, I mean, I was early on in my life. I looked at a SaaS company. Sorry, this is that's why the microphone's so far away. I don't want to talk about it publicly.
Not
yeah, no, I think I'm not spending enough time on podiums. I think early on in my career I looked at a SaaS company. I was an investor in a SaaS company, and there was a billing company that was came to me and wanted to talk to me about a seed investment, and I went and talked to one of my portfolio companies. He said that stuff is rubbish. Turned out to be Zura, so probably should have invested in that one. But you do your work, and you look at what's around there, and you do your diligence, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Go ahead.
What's happening? What are the advances happening in the sensor field? Two-part question. So, any new thing happening, any innovations coming in the sensors, and how the integration with silicon? Where are new things happening? New type of integration that never has been seen before.
So on this, make it kind of cut on the sensor side. So there are a couple of things on the sensor, right? One is that you're being able to put more compute power at the edge, and Cisco would call it kind of fog computing, edge computing, and so on. And so the decrease in reduction in the price of that and the ability to miniaturize that. So you're putting more of the analytics and more of the processing at the edge in the sensors. That's a pretty big deal. Because getting that information back to the cloud always either may not make sense, or from a timing perspective, if your car has to stop suddenly, or a locomotive has to stop, or some action has to be taken, that's a good thing. There's areas that, some of these sensors, which are battery powered sensors, there's a whole issue around power that people don't talk about, right? Not all sensors can be plugged into an electrical outlet. And so there are advances that are being made there, but that's a huge limitation right now from that perspective. On the silicon stuff, I don't know, I'm not a...
Silicon photonics, those are ridiculously expensive. I mean, look, the best sensing technologies that I've seen are things like printable sensors for chemicals. So I teach entrepreneurship at Berkeley, and some of my students are at a company called Chemisense, which took some technology from Caltech and commercialized it. They can do printable sensors which can sense any of 120 different chemicals, and they can keep on creating them. Low cost, fractions of a penny, but the nice part is that it doesn't manifest itself through any transistor logic, or manifests it through changes in resistance. So you can get incredibly cheaper sensors for breathable strips around for patients who have COPD, for detections of carbon dioxide across the board, air quality within cars, where you brought those costs down extraordinarily low. And to Zia's point, the compute around it doesn't need to be a supercomputer, but it is powerful enough to be able to take changes in resistance values to give you enough triggers to make a more intelligent decision.
And but I'm really glad you asked the question, because you can't have IoT without the T. And a lot of people kind of tend to forget that and just focus on the software side of it. You need both of those pieces to work in harmony for the whole solution to work.
Go ahead.
So what are the key challenges or roadblocks do you see for companies, large companies that are asset heavy when embarking on this IoT strategy? What are the key takeaways?
Oh yeah, so it's a long list. So first of all, at the simplest level, which ones of your assets actually have a sensor, which one don't? Okay, that can be a huge big answer. And instrumenting those that don't is not straightforward from a cost perspective. Okay, so once you've instrumented them, which ones are connected, which ones are not? So there's the whole drama about actually getting the data from those assets, and that's still a lot of work that needs to be done to do that. So heaven forbid you actually get through that part of it. Then the question becomes is, what do you actually do with the data? Can you actually change your business processes based on that information that you get, either in how you do maintenance, how you do deliveries, whatever the use case may be. And so because now you're getting all this different new source of data, you have to kind of change all of that. When you start changing business processes, then it starts impacting all other types of businesses. When you start thinking about new business models, and then it's, well, we used to do it this way, now we want to price through outcomes. So it's starting, at least the companies I've been involved in, a pretty fundamental set of questions around what they are as a company and what do they actually sell. And if you start saying, we used to be making this device for the last 50 years, and now suddenly, we have to sell information, or we have to sell access to that device, that then gets to this kind of what issue I talked about in terms of the skill set. There is a different skill set required in these companies to look at this type of problem. And so organizational issues and people issues really become big things. And it's a legacy thing, right? Companies are on for 20, 30, 40 years. And again, caution here, those may be the unexciting, boring things, but parking was boring, taxi cabs was boring, okay? And you go down these industries, these are the industries that are worth billions and billions that will be reinvented with interesting, sexy new business models based on this combination of physical data and technology.
Just one other point, and I think this is just a different perspective on the same question, is I think one of the things is society is going to be reinvented, not just companies, right? I'll give you my rough and dirty math on this, but the number I believe right now is about 50% of the world's population lives in urban environments. Right? And its population is about 7 billion, so let's say 3.5 billion. They say by 2050, the population of the world will be 10 billion, plus or minus again, and 70% of the world's population is going to live in urban environments. Right? So the numbers are, but actually what's happening in urban environments in 35 years, the population is going to double. Right? So if everybody around the world in those urban environments aspires to live like Westerners do, like we do today, this place is going to collapse, or the world is going to collapse. You cannot keep up with that, right? So what's going to happen is I think you'll see things like IoT that are going to transform how people live. And the math around that is, think about cars. Zia gave you the utilization of a locomotive. I mean, look at the utilization of cars. Cars are used, your car is used how many hours a day? Right? And then you apply that in an urban environment, imagine you buy transportation as a service, and the number of cars is decreased in the city by 10 or 20%. That's huge ramifications of density, resource usage, how cities are designed, how they're built. So I would urge us all to be thinking about more dramatically the changes, and actually a lot of that's going to be happening in emerging markets, but the leadership is going to come from here because people aspire to live like Westerners do. I mean, that's the lifestyle model that people want to follow. So that's why I think it's particularly powerful that IoT is having an impact here on how people design their cities. I mean, San Francisco is all about micro apartments and you can't get parking. Nothing to do with them. They don't want you to buy parking. They don't sell parking in buildings. They don't rent parking anymore.
So let's do the last two questions and then go. You've had your hand up a bunch of times, sir.
So you talked about connected home devices that very few people who are actually utilizing them in the case of the microwave. But do you feel that they just don't have a value, or do you feel that it's too complex for people to?
There's a lot of value. Not waking up and finding out that you actually have an extra hour versus worrying around that you don't on daylight savings is a great example for value in it.
Then the challenge is the utility of it, or it's not easy enough to use.
How do you provision
what
it?
Opportunities are there in making things that are designed to make things easier to use, make those easier? What are the opportunities there?
Well, they're self-evident at one level, right? The provisioning parts of it. How do you make it so that it's easier? You're not going to put a 2D barcode on everything because I don't expect my mother to take a 2D barcode and go ahead and make it. Can you make it so that it works out of the box? That's an ideal solution. But how do you make that so that it makes sense? You're not going to stick a cell phone chip into it because the cost of that is too high. So what is the rational path to make it happen? Well, maybe it turns out that you can make a cellular chip that's really cheap because you only need 1 kilobyte of data. Please, go ahead.
I was just going to make an observation that, the whole concept of user experience that I know Ziad talks about at, at D-School. The user experience, I think what he's saying is that if you can create beautiful user experience around an IoT device like the Nest is, it's like maybe there's a refrigerator that has a unique experience, I mean, I'm yet to see one or imagine one, but I think that's what you're trying to say, right?
Absolutely.
I think Apple has brought this concept of design, and I think, by the way, I see the design thinking missing from the IoT use cases.
Totally missing from this.
Well, it was created since Steve went away, so,
It's
what can I
gorgeous.
say?
Just
But
not as
I
fun.
think there are lots of possibilities of creating better user experiences in some aspects of use cases of IoT space also.
Well, I think it's gonna happen more because again, the physical world around us is much more prevalent than the electronic world around us in a sense, right? And so people interact with cars and devices and phones, I mean not phones, airlines and all kinds of things, right? So your ability to interact with that digitally so that it changes your experience will be very profound.
Last question. You had it first. Go ahead.
Thanks. By the way, the usage is 6% on a vehicle, so 94% of the time your car is not used and I think what part.
That's what you
Yeah,
think.
that's-
The data is actually still being used, but you're not getting billed for it. There's
Yeah.
a lot of data collection that's happening.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's a perfect example as an asset that's just
Sure.
big waste. And I think IoT is going to really
Hey,
fix
it's not a
this.
waste. We're making lots of money off it. We're quite happy.
So my question though is, what role do you think open source software is going to play in IoT? Right, we touched on horizontals and the difficulty on standardization, and most of them are all open source, all joined OIC, whatever. What role do you think open source will play? Because I have a problem with verticals in only one area, and that fragmentation is going to prevent Cisco's $13 trillion promise to number, unless they're harmonized, which sort of lends towards open source. So, but your thoughts?
So it depends on not what is getting open sourced, right? So on one hand, there's at the technology layer, whether it's the LAMP stack or a whole range of other open source technologies, which will be used to build products like they are any other software products. So, and that will happen, right? The interesting question there, and you weren't directly asking that, there's by the way 282 companies that say they have an IoT platform. We just did this kind of, it's unbelievable. Everybody thinks they have a platform, right? And you're only a platform, by the way, News Alert, if other people say you're a platform,
Exactly.
not if you say you're a platform. But I think there's an opportunity to have an open source IoT platform that's built with the contributions, includes the standard stuff, that acts as that bridge between the physical world and the data, and spits out the data so that the app world can consume that. So there's this piece of the puzzle where I think it's interesting. Now, who does that? Is it a community that comes together? Is it, I don't know, Red Hat? Is it who does that? Right? Will be an interesting question to answer. But otherwise, then there's all kinds of open source. By the way, the whole do-it-yourself movement around devices and physical devices, that's open source as well. The 3D printing and all the files and methods that you can get. So there's a lot of stuff around, not just the traditional open source stuff, but open access to information.
Just one more question in the back, if you wanted to answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Me?
You did, right? You have one answer?
So, you guys evaluate companies and you're VC, and you talked about how vertical is important. Horizontal is not that, right?
He said that, I didn't say that.
So, I have a use case.
I'm an entrepreneur, by the way.
And I really want to understand your point of view. For example, I work with a group, came out of Caltech, and they're making these implantable chips, that goes under skin, very small, 50 cent, and can continuously monitor your glucose. And it's a platform that they can do urine testing. Another-
283 now.
What's that?
It's a platform, right? So now we have to update the number to 283.
So that, there is no IoT in that space unless their solution irons out first. It's a horizontal solution, and they call themselves IoT company because yes, it will change the way we live. You get into
First you need the FDA approval before anything can happen, for something like this.
So they, of course, the full solution would be done by their talking to Sanofi, insulin giant, and they will do the whole solution. They have channels and everything. But that's an enabling horizontal. There is no IoT in that space. That doesn't matter now. I mean, after that, you have a chip, then you wear a watch on top of the scale and it takes you to lifespan, and then you have platform. Everything.
So what's your question in that?
So how do you look at that kind of application in IoT space? It's a horizontal solution, but it's an enabling technology. There's no IoT in that space.
So you'll have a different answer than I will, but why don't you go first?
Yeah, my answer would be, I think, and I visited ChemSense website recently, I think you've got to think through this. If you want to be an entrepreneur in this space, I personally don't think a horizontal thing is what I would fund. I don't know if there will be other people who want it. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort, and frankly, maybe beyond my lifetime before it's worth a lot of money. This is the reality of things that touch the body in this society, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good thing. You want that to be hard to do. So that's where I end up. I mean, I was just thinking while you were speaking orthogonally, go do something for pets. Pets may not be regulated the same way. Maybe you do something with some solution that's monitoring, I don't know, heart disease in dogs. I make this up. But build a whole solution. Go do it. Build a business. You'll find that much more rewarding potentially and more interesting than going out and doing something. I have no idea whether that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, so it really depends on what your business model is. If you're going to be a widget provider for a specific part of a bigger solution, then you got to find the person who's worried about the bigger solution piece and figure out how you fit within it. But honestly, big players or people who own one small part of that don't have as much value across the entire chain. So, people like, and I say this with knowing the fact that we build big solutions that take a lot of little components into it. So yes, people like me are always interested in it, but if I've been an entrepreneur sooner than these guys were because I did it in my 30s. You don't want to, that's not the right play as an entrepreneur. You want to go own the full stack yourself because that's where the real value is as a business.
Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's worth doing.
Yeah. All right, okay, we'll take the last question. Go ahead.
Actually, technical question. What are the time-related issue you see in IoT field?
Real time versus.
It's more than that because the time zone versus synchronization versus is it an important thing? Has it created major problem, major issues, or it is just what
You mean time zone or real time?
both? Anything that has to do with time and IoT.
Okay. Sorry, I can answer the real time question. When most people say real time, they don't mean real time.
Of course.
Okay, and so is real time like, a millisecond? Is it 1 second? Is it 2 seconds? And so on. If you actually look at your use case, when most people talk about real time, they actually don't mean kind of hyper real time, excluding the time related to the network latency and so on and so forth. So go back to the locomotive thing, for example. They had to put in massive extra infrastructure, telecommunication infrastructure, on the locomotive and on the side of the track, because there was a millisecond moment when you wanted that locomotive to brake. That was real time. Okay, if you're getting something every minute, every 5 minutes, 2 times a day, 5 times a day, that's not real time. So it is very use case specific from that perspective. Everybody seems to, oh, we'll get this in real time. You're not getting it in real time. In terms of time zones, I don't have a freaking clue.
Well, arguably, if you have time as a measure into it, and you have a location tag into it, you should be able to get
Yeah,
a local time.
+3, -3.
Should be easy enough to do. Okay, so I want to make sure that we leave enough time for more networking here. Thank you, everyone, for coming and attending. Thank you, Amar. Thank you, Dia.
Thank you for that.
By the way, I agree with you. I'm President and General Manager of Undersea Labs. It's a subsidiary of Undersea that does smart cards for identification
security is not expensive. The hardware, SHA-256,
All right, so we'll actually.
fantastic. Yeah.